everybody into the waiting room. Good evening.
Actually, it's not being used.
Hello.
Hello.
Everybody.
Hello.
Hi, all. Good evening.
Hello.
Good
How you
evening.
doing?
Good. Thanks. How's everybody?
Good.
Hi,
Good.
Lisa.
How are you?
Hi, Miss.
Hello.
Hi.
There we
Oh,
go.
My goodness,
beautiful.
what gorgeous tree.
Grammy.
Juliana.
Hi.
Hi,
Is
Juliana.
everyone? Hi, Grammy. Is everyone cozy? I'm in PJs, but my PJs and my day clothes, they don't differ too much these days. So.
In PJs.
Perfect. Nice and festive. And is Lauren, are you here?
I am here. Am I on? Okay, good. I'm not on mute. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So hang on, what I'm gonna do is I'll mute everybody and then we'll have a chance to ask some questions in a little bit. So.
$10 ביום זה $300 בחודש.
Zoom's always fun. All right, hang on. So let's first, I'm gonna unmute you again, Lauren. Here you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Have I unmuted? Great. Wonderful.
I can hear you. Cheers. Welcome. And is anyone else drinking this extraordinarily strong drink that I really won't be able to finish with the wine and the rum that you wrote about? I wanted to try it, but I'll tell you.
Oh no, I mean, it will knock you sideways. Those 18th century planters, their tolerance was so much higher than ours. When I was in law school, I took a class on the Constitutional Convention, and the one thing that stuck with me was how much our founding fathers drank pretty much every single day, like barrels and barrels of stuff. And then you read their speeches and you can tell where they're starting to get a bit slurred. You're like, oh, the claret was kicking in.
Yeah, so funny. Well, we have a travel and food book club, and so often there's drinks that are you drinking it too?
Mine has much lighter on the rum because I still have to manage small children tonight. Although you do too.
I do too, but my husband's either going to help me with the kids or help me to finish this. So either way, I'll be okay.
Give him the kids. You keep the drink.
Thank you. But yeah, so often we will learn about different drinks, or we've had bartender or mixologists come on before and teach us about making different cocktails and fun things like that. So I read about this in the beginning of your book, and then it was mentioned several times thereafter, and I thought, what a fun little drink to try. That was really fun. And anyway, so welcome again. You are such a great not only writer but such an incredible historian as well.
Well, thank you. That's so kind of you.
It's true. You're welcome. It's pretty amazing just how much, and I know this isn't, obviously your only, historical novel that you've written, but so much goes into that. And, you can tell that you really get down to the nitty gritty with the details and everything. And so I'd love to hear more about, your whole process. And
well, it's funny. I started out as a professional historian. I was getting my PhD in Tudor Stuart England because I had this idea that I was going to write a huge blockbuster doorstop epic novel about the English Civil War, because clearly that's what everyone wants to read about. But I realized that academic history does not, while it teaches you how to research, it doesn't really prepare you to write good historical fiction, because the things you're reading and the questions you're asking, they aren't, okay, what would this person have been experiencing? They're, what do other historians say about this topic? What are the economic and political causes of the English Civil War? Not what was it like to live through the English Civil War? And I also realized I loved being a historical dilettante and getting to hop into lots of different time periods and learn about those. And of course, like, my husband still makes fun of my dissertation topic because I spent 7 years working on 3 years of history. It was royalist conspiracies in the latter half of the English Civil Wars, 1646 to 1649. And if the rum in the drink hasn't put you to sleep by now, that title should. I mean, the classic academic joke of everyone focuses really narrowly. So when I left academia to write full time with a brief digression as a lawyer in between, I found it so incredibly freeing to be able to go anywhere I like. It's a bit like having a historical travel blog, except that I put more dialogue in my stuff. So I love the getting to explore different places and time periods and try to figure out what would it have been like to live back then. What would the lived experience have been, including the rum punch?
Right, right. No, I mean, like I said, even the details of what they were drinking and just, the different meals and the preparation of the meals and how it was presented throughout the book.
Well, I am so lucky. I have a good librarian friend who's my secret weapon. Actually, that was the most useful thing I ever learned in grad school. My advisor took me down to the library and said, always be nice to the librarians. They'll be your best friends. And he was so right, because my secret weapon librarian friend, in addition to sending me books she thinks I'll like all the time, also when I was having trouble finding the sorts of sources I needed on the summer country, because researching Barbados was different from anything I've ever researched before, she went and found me. So part of the book is set in 1854, and it's an English woman in Barbados in 1854. She found me the letters of an English woman visiting Barbados in 1854, writing home to her father. And so the stuff she included in her letters, it's the sort of stuff an English woman visiting Barbados would notice, which is what I wanted, because a traveler's experience is so different from a native's. And I want to know, well, what would an English person find strange or interesting or noticeable? And all of that was in the letters, including avocado, which
Yeah.
I thought was so fascinating. They found that this was such an exotic thing, and they called it subaltern's butter because it was so cheap. Butter was so rare and expensive in Barbados, but avocado was so cheap that you just mashed up and put on bread. It was the sort of thing a lowly subaltern would eat. And now, of course, we're all about avocado toast.
Of course. Oh, that's hysterical. Wow. And your librarian friend, now you live in New York City. Is this at the New York Public Library, or do you have, I'm sure you have librarian friends all over.
Well, this is my favorite librarian friend. She is in Georgia, and we actually became friends through my books. I was doing a book talk at her library, and you know those people where you say 2 words to them and you guys just click. She and I had one of those click moments. We'd read and loved all the same books, and we became really good friends and are really good friends to this day. And whenever I'm in Georgia, I stop by and visit her. I've stayed over at her house. She comes and she sees me when she's in New York. And when I'm stuck on researching a book, I send her an SOS text message. And the next thing I know, I get all of these articles from really obscure journals. So it's amazing.
That is very cool. And what a fun, relationship to have. And I'm sure she realizes how important that, the information she's given you has turned out.
Oh, she absolutely knows. And I mean, the summer country owed so much to her, because most of my previous books have been set in England or, in other places English people go. And my main problem was I had too many sources. One of my advisors compared it to trying to read the phone book, that there's just so much there, you'll never get through it all. And you can't really even figure out what to focus on because you're just inundated with material. But when it came to researching life in 19th century Barbados, and particularly the interior life or the lived experience of an enslaved woman, there is just so little there. And I found myself sort of having to look for, one of the books that a friend of mine who's still an academic recommended to me, I got all excited. It was about the lives of enslaved women in 18th and 19th century Barbados. But then when I opened it, it was all about how there are very few sources and you have to triangulate from the absences. And I just wasn't used to triangulating from absences. So having someone who could sort of winkle out the little pieces of information there are for me made such a difference in this book.
Right. Well, and how did it get to the point where you decided you wanted to write about this time in history and this location in Barbados?
It started with a girls' trip. So my 2 best friends, this was never a book I had intended to write or meant to write. I began my career writing about really light, happy topics like the Napoleonic Wars and thwarting Napoleon. And I never wanted to deal with like heavy things like slavery and, cholera epidemics and all that. But Way back in 2010, I went on a girls' trip with my two best friends from grad school. And the idea was we were going to lie on a beach and just do nothing. We were just going to completely relax and drink fruity drinks. And it was going to be a great break. But the problem was all three of us spent most of our time in libraries. We were not used to direct sunlight. So we got out there on the beach and we're like, oh my God, we're burning. We're being eaten by mosquitoes. This is not going to work. Although the fruity drinks were great.
Yes.
But so we slugged down our fruity drinks and we sought out the nearest old thing that was indoors. So we wound up on a plantation tour. And at the plantation, they told us a story about how the plantation house had burned down and the ward of the owner had died in a fire, the Portuguese ward of the owner, except that the child was neither Portuguese nor his ward. She was his own child by an enslaved woman. And he had snuck her into the household by pretending that she was the daughter of a friend by a Portuguese woman. And anyway, so the rest of the story was all about the plantation owner and how he went mad after his daughter's death and spent the rest of his years rocking on the veranda, rocking on a portion of the ruined veranda, and how you could still hear his rocking to this day. And it was a wonderful Gothic ghost story. I mean, I love a good Gothic ghost story, but what I really wanted to know was, where was the child's mother? Because she was never mentioned. And I thought, okay, had she agreed to her child being taken from her and handed over in the hopes of her child having a better life, or had the child been wrenched from her? Had she had no say in this? And in that real story, the story I was told that day at the plantation, there were two kids. So clearly by the same mother. So clearly there was I don't want to call it a relationship, but there was a liaison. I mean, that word is wrong too. There are no good words for describing it, but of some duration. And so you had to wonder, what if the plantation owner cared enough about these children to bring them into his household and make them his wards? Why didn't he free them? Why didn't he free their mother? Was he not able to for some reason? And I was fascinated and disturbed and curious. And the tour guide, the poor tour guide, was like, I don't know. We don't know the mother. She had not traveled down in history at all. All they knew was that she was a nameless enslaved woman. And so, of course, I was avoiding working on the next book, which was set in France during the Napoleonic Wars, about a totally different topic. So I procrastinated by reading up on the history of Barbados, and I came upon similar cases where, for whatever reason, the plantation owner did not own his own children and was not able to free them. And so that got me thinking, and that's how this book came to be. But it took a long time for this book to come to be, because when I first got back to New York and my editor said, okay, so what are you planning to write next? I said, well, I have this idea for a book set in Barbados. And she's like, the Caribbean? I was like, yes, fruity drinks will be fabulous. And she's like, no. No one wants to read a book set in the Caribbean. You can write whatever you want as long as it's set in England. And then she paused and she thought for a moment, because she realized that was way too big a loophole. And she's like, you can write whatever you want as long as it's set in 19th century England. Okay, maybe this isn't the book I'm supposed to write, because again, I really slavery is a really tough topic. And my background as a historian was really in British history. I had touched on the Caribbean a little in the course of my graduate student life, but it's not my field. And it's a very particular, very detailed field of study. I was like, I don't know, maybe this is a sign that I'm not meant to write this book. I will just step away. But that story haunted me, especially once I had my own children years later. It kept coming back to me, this mother whose child had been taken away and made not her own. I kept wondering, was she there in the household as a maidservant? Was she allowed to hold her child but not acknowledge her child? And what must it like to have your child die and not be able to grieve for them? Anyway, so my agent finally was like, oh my God, you have to write this book so you will stop talking about it. And so that's how this book happened.
Wow. So the trip was in 2010. Then when was it when you actually, dove headfirst and started the writing process for it?
So I'm trying to remember. I think I finally got the green light from my agent to work on this book in 2016.
Okay.
And so it was a long time after, maybe it was either 2015 or 2016. And so I spent, actually, no, it must have been 2015. Sorry, everything blurs after a while.
Oh, you're busy.
Yeah. And, kids kind of drain your brain. You know how that goes.
I get it. Yes.
But yes, I remember it was before I was even pregnant with my second child. So it must have been 2015. And I spent a couple of years researching the book. And it's funny, there were a couple of points where it still almost didn't happen because when my agent went to go pitch the book to different publishing houses, a lot of people came back and said, that's very interesting, but would she like to write a book set during World War II instead? So, yeah.
Well, it all worked out. You got it, published. It's been a great success. And so it actually came out last year, correct? It came out
Yes.
last year
Yeah.
and then it was re-released this year as
Yeah, the paperback came out this summer.
so that's fantastic. And how many books had you had published prior to this? I know your name is on so many novels. I know you've written so many of them yourself, and then you have a writing group, right? Which is it three authors?
There were three of us. Yeah. So I've written, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember what number book this was even. So the book that's coming out this year is going to be my 21st book. So I think this was like my 19th book or something like that. But yes, I also co-write with two really good friends, Karen White and Beatrice Williams, who also write similar sorts of books that go back and forth between different time periods. And that was another one of these girls trip sort of things that happened by accident because the three of us were together hanging out at a conference and might have had a little bit to drink. So we started speculating about how much fun it would be if we could just travel together always, because Karen and I had just both come back from book tours, and it's really lonely when you're on book tour by yourself. You go back to that hotel room, you're there in the fuzzy robe, the room service guy gives you pitying looks when he sees the size of your order. But and it's just, we were like, oh my God, how fun would it be if we wrote a book together and then we could go on book tour together and our publisher would pay for our bar bill. This was right after 50 Shades of Grey had come out. So we were like, oh my God, and we even have the perfect book idea. We'll set it in Scotland and call it 50 Shades of Plaid, because it would be like Outlander and 50 Shades. Anyway, we were so slosh. And we roll out into the conference hallway, and who should we bump into but my friend Karen's editor. And we're like, oh my God, Cindy, we have the best book idea ever. You're going to want to buy this right now, 50 Shades of Plaid. And she looks at us, and there's this voice that editors use with authors. It's a kindergarten teacher voice. It's the, okay, you're getting a little overexcited, I need to calm you down voice. And she looked at us and said, why don't you go upstairs, take an aspirin, have a few glasses of water, you'll feel better in the morning.
Yeah.
And actually, we felt awful in the morning, and we were so embarrassed over the 50 Shades of Plaid idea because that was totally
quite funny. Oh, it's very funny.
But we couldn't shake the idea of writing a book together. And so we decided, since we all write these dual time period novels, we'd write a triple time period novel set around a Gilded Age townhouse in New York in 3 different time periods. But the hilarious thing was when we went and called Cindy and said, so we actually did write a book together, she was so horrified. And we had to be like, no, it's not 50 Shades of Plaid, we swear. It's a real book, not a joke book. And
and that was the first of how many now that you've all written together?
Right now we're working on our 4th collaboration together.
Wow.
We love working together. It was one of those things where no one really wanted us to do it. Our agents were worried it would take away too much time from our solo books. And none of us had ever written with anyone else. We weren't sure if it would be a complete disaster, but we really wanted them to pay for our bar bill. So we sally forth, and it actually, the way our minds work together, it's just a wonderful thing. We just build off each other, and we joke that working together defies the time-space continuum, because when we're working on a book together, it feels like we have more time because we get so energized by getting to work with each other and flip ideas off each other that it almost makes it feel like we have more time to write our own books instead of taking away time.
That's so interesting. Wow.
Yeah, bizarre.
No, that's really cool though. And then so as far as your own book, or so I'm sorry, that book the first one you'd written together was called what?
The Forgotten Room.
Forgotten Room.
Our poor publisher, they had we joke that we were a pity buy, because at the time they really loved Karen, and so they bought it to make Penguin bought it to make Karen happy. And they really thought it was going to be crappy. And we'll never forget when our editor read the manuscript and called the 3 of us up and was like, it's actually really good. And we were like, you sound so surprised. And then the book hit the Times list and the USA Today list, and they were still really surprised. And we were surprised too. We were we thought maybe it was a fluke. And then we wrote the second book together, and that one was like magic too. And readers seemed to love it. So, and by now we're on our fourth one, and we've decided maybe it isn't a fluke after all. And so
I
it's
I
a
would
wonderful
say,
experience.
yeah, it sounds it. And I'm not sure if you know, so last month we read Hazel Gaynor's latest book.
I love her. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great. So we'd spoken to Hazel and Heather Webb back earlier this year because they write a few books together, and I was just so curious how when writers collaborate, how it's typically done. And I know with Hazel and Heather, they often take a different character perspective, and that's how it's done. Now, I haven't yet read the books that you've collaborated with these other authors. So is that how you do it as well, or how do you go about writing these great novels with other people?
Well, that's how we do it too. We stumbled on a process that worked for us with that first book. So what happened was with that first one, we met up in Alice's Teacup in New York on 64th Street, and we just hogged a table and consumed endless cups of tea, and just the story evolved, and we wound up plotting it out literally chapter by chapter while sitting there, just wolfing down scones while that poor server kept hovering in the hopes that we would finally leave, and we would be like, more hot water, please. And they'd be like, you don't want the check yet? And we're like, no, we have another 4 chapters left to go.
Right.
And so we did chapter by chapter outline, which we never do for our own books. And then we went off to our various bits of the world. I'm in New York, Karen's in Atlanta, and Beatrice is up in the wilds of Connecticut. And we wound up, so we had 3 timelines and 3 characters. So each of us claimed a character, and we wrote round robin in the order in which you then read it in the book.
Wow. Yeah, I would assume that that's got to be the best way to do it, because then you have your voice and they can still maintain theirs. But
Well, the weird thing we found out, we really thought that we all have very distinct voices, and we thought that anyone who picked up that first book would know immediately which of us had written which character. And we had not intended to keep who wrote what a secret, but then our editor, Karen's editor, sent back the wrong edits to the wrong authors.
oh no.
I know, exactly. We're like, actually, and we figured, okay, she hasn't drank caffeine, so maybe that's what did it,
Right.
but she needed some coffee. But then people started reading the book, and we started getting guesses about who had written what, and they were mostly wrong. And we realized that because we were writing round robin and we always read each other's chapters before writing our own, something weird had happened. We had created new voices for ourselves. And we're actually, in our real lives, we've all done choral singing at some point in our lives. So we think so we have that kind of adaptive ear where you're taught to blend your voice with other people's. So we think that what happened is we blended to the point where people can't tell.
That is so cool.
It's really, and so the second book, we switched publishing houses, and we went from Karen's longtime editor to Beatrice's and my editor, and she sent us the wrong edits too. And at that point, we're like, okay, this isn't just a fluke. I know, and she did it with the third book too. We're so curious to see if she'll figure it out with the fourth book. So now we deliberately keep it secret. We think it's hilarious.
And you let them know at the end? You let everyone know later on? No?
Yeah, we were going to, and we'd actually, played with the idea of like auctioning it off for charity or something like that. But we kind of love that no one can read it as these are the Beatrice portions, these are the Lauren portions, and that because they can't tell, they have to read it as one book. And actually because it's the word that keeps coming up is seamless. We've had these wonderful conspiracy theories where people will email me and be like, it's okay, you can tell me. I know you really just do all the research, and then Beatrice writes the whole thing, right? And we're like, no, not actually how that happens.
That is really funny. Well, that's great because, often you can tell there is usually a distinction between the different perspectives and authors. So that's really neat that, what a fun idea you have about the choral voices blending, because I sing as well. So that's an interesting thing to consider to me.
It was something we didn't even think about before we started working together. And actually, after the first book, when we realized that people couldn't figure it out, we started deliberately messing with people because, well, that's kind of who we are. And so we put in little Easter eggs, and we've all read all of each other's books. So there were references, sometimes we'll put references to each other's characters or books or whatever in our own chapters. or
Oh,
it might be, our own books, our own chapters. But there was one book, I had a really long running series in which there was a modern grad student who lived in London and historical portion. And our second book had a modern American woman in London who winds up staying at the estate of this, sort of disgraced MP. And everyone's like, oh my God, you must have ran those chapters because it's totally like Eloise and Colin from the Pink Books. And I was like, or maybe
yeah.
not.
So you guys must have a lot of fun with that, and just working together in general. It sounds like it's a really nice mix, and you guys got lucky.
We got so lucky. And so,
Yeah.
the crazy thing is, so after that, I was invited to be part of a linked anthology. I was like, oh, collaborating is so great. Of course, I'll do it. And my experience with the anthology, where actually half of us wound up dropping out. So I will name no names. And it's nothing, I wound up not being in the anthology in the end because I left. But I realized that, with some people, you have that magical connection. And with some people, you just don't. And I can't imagine anyone else who I could work with the way I work with Karen and Beatrice. We're really best friends.
That's fantastic. And so when is your next book coming out? Next year or this year?
So, oh gosh, it's so
2021?
hard. I feel like this year has been so thrown off too. So my sense of
Yeah.
time is so confused. I keep forgetting that we're still in 2020. It
Everyone.
feels like we should be in 2022 by now.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's all just wacky, but we're not so far from 2021. That's pretty
Knockwood.
hard to believe as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so the paperback of our last one, All the Ways We Said Goodbye, comes out in January 2021, I think.
Okay, so
January, February. Mhm.
okay, soon. That's very
Really
cool.
soon. And that one is set in France in World War I, World War II, and the 1960s, all set around the Paris Ritz.
And I've seen that cover. So many of your books are, I'm always just looking online at different beautiful book covers and getting ideas. And so many of your books are always, if you're interested in this, you might like this. And they're such gorgeous covers. And that one as well, All the Ways We Said Goodbye, I noticed a while ago. It's a really, really beautiful cover.
Thank you. No, we were so happy with that cover because it was so hard to and
Oh, sorry. It's my children FaceTiming on my cell phone with their cousins out
oh
there.
my gosh,
Somehow
that's so
bringing
great.
to my computer, so I'm sorry.
No, trust me, I completely understand. I used to joke that when I was doing book talks, my husband would always somehow, I would say, please just don't call me. When I was on book tour, I'd be like, just don't call me between 7 and 8 because I'll be doing a book talk. And somehow that translates in their heads to call me between 7 and 8.
So funny. Sorry. No, well, I don't know how to, maybe someone can help me with this later. I don't know how to get it so my computer doesn't ring every time my phone rings. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, yeah, so that's great. Okay, so January, February, All the Ways We Said Goodbye. And you're working on, the one you're currently working on, would that be 2022?
No, so I have one that's coming out in March of 2021, and I am so excited about that one. It's so far away from Barbados, though. So my next book is called Band of Sisters, and it's based on the true story of a group of Smith College grads who went off to France at the height of World War I to bring humanitarian aid to French villagers right behind the front lines.
Wow.
And so it's funny because in some ways it's the opposite of the summer country, which is very tropical and summery. And there they were in the middle of winter in the Somme, up to their knees in mud with like rain and snow, trying to bring food and supplies to these poor stranded villagers who had been crushed between two armies.
Wow. Oh, that's going to be great. I'm excited to read that one. I actually already have a copy. So,
Well, I hope you enjoy. I loved writing this book. I mean, these women I connected with in a way I feel like I have very rarely connected with anyone I've written about before, because here they were, these nice, overeducated, upper middle class American women who went off to France at the height of a war, to a desolate war zone. And they were doing things like trying to restock the French villagers' agricultural base. So they were buying cows and chickens, and some of them had never seen a cow or chicken before. So they go and they buy 72 roosters by accident and then are like, wait, why aren't any of these laying eggs? And it's just all this stuff like that where they wrote these wonderful, hilarious letters home, which are, 9/10 self-mockery and 1/10 intense earnestness. And I adored these women, and I hope the book does them justice.
Oh, I'm sure that it will. And so with that book you finished and you completed, so that one will be out. What months did you say? March?
So it's going to be out this coming March.
Or March. Okay.
And there are already ARCs floating around various places. I think there should be another ARC giveaway on Goodreads or a HarperCollins sweepstakes coming up sometime soon.
Oh, that's fantastic. Great. Well, I want to give the members a chance to ask you some questions. So if anyone has a question for Lauren, would love for you to unmute yourself and feel free to ask, because I know a lot of people loved The Summer Country. And yeah, I've heard a lot of great, excited feedback from
Now,
people.
I'm so excited to hear your questions.
Oh, yeah. So let's hear you. Okay. Anjali, you're unmuted?
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Hi, I'm reading your book. I haven't finished it, but I'm loving the book, Summer Country.
Oh, thank you.
Some of my questions you already answered, but I was going to ask you if you have already written or are planning to write anything set in India, especially in the 19th century when the British were there.
I have written a book set in India, but it was part of that ongoing series I wrote about spies during the Napoleonic Wars. It was set in Hyderabad in 1804.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
but I would love to write another book set in India. I've always been fascinated by it, although, you know, and I fell in love with the research for that book, especially, I don't know if you've read William Dalrymple's book, White Moguls.
Yes, I have.
It actually, I had known that book was going to be set in India, but I had thought it was going to be set in the north of India around the machinations of Lord Lake during the Napoleonic Wars. And then I read White Moguls while I was doing my research, and the whole book shifted to the court of
Yes.
Hyderabad because it was just, oh my goodness, that material was too fascinating not to use.
Yes, but he has also written another book set in Delhi. It's called The City of Jinn.
Ooh, I will have to read that.
Yeah, that's set in Delhi, but it's in the Mughal Empire time.
Just such an amazing.
Fascinating, yes. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who else has a question? I see Julie Oliver, you have a question. Do you want to come on the screen? If not, I can read your question. That's okay. Julie?
Hey, yes.
Hi.
So I loved this book, especially since it was something very different set in Barbados with slavery. But at the end, I'm thinking, did Charles and Jenny plan that burning of the wrong plantation and concoct this scheme to escape together? That was what was in my head. It didn't come out at all that way in the story, but I thought that's where my head went.
I should ask, do people mind spoilers? Has everyone?
Oh, for this book, for The Summer Country?
Yeah.
Typically when we have these meetings, everyone's read it. I mean, if anyone wants us to halt, please speak now, but otherwise.
If anyone does not want me to like give away things about the ending, let me know now before I answer. Give a moment for a show of hands or any comments to pop up. Okay.
I'm gonna say, I think you're gonna be okay, but that.
Yeah, no, because I have gotten a lot of questions about the ending, and
Right,
it's one of those
completely
things where, yeah, but no, I think that was just one of, I mean, everything was so confused on the night of the rising, and people were sort of all over the place. The organization rapidly fell apart, and so I think the burning the wrong plantation was, you know, sort of a little bit like when I was joking about telling my husband not to call between 7 and 8, and he calls between 7 and 8. You know, you say one thing, people hear another, and especially in so much confusion when people are so wound up, that sort of thing can happen. I wish Jenny and Charles had been that organized, but I think that was part of their problem all along, is that Charles would never have come up with something like that. And I've gotten a lot of questions about the ending and what really happened with them. And so do people want me to comment on that, or should I stay quiet?
Yes, please comment.
Yeah, I think we'd love to hear.
So there was, this is something I've noticed over several books, is I tend to like to explain everything in my books. And then I'll usually have an editor who will come in and be like, no, it's better ambiguous, leave that chapter out. And that happened to me like with my book, The Ashford Affair, if anyone's read it, where there's a missing chapter that's now on my website for people who want to read the all how it happened bit. And a couple of my other books as well. And the same thing happened with Summer Country, where there's a chapter that got cut out where we find out what happens in between the night of the rising and Charles is winding up in France years later. And so basically what happens is Charles finally grows a spine. And because he is so shaken by the fact that he lost his daughter and he almost lost Jenny, that he decides to finally take the step he hadn't taken before and just get out and get Jenny out with him. And so he finally acts, he leaves, and they go to France and build a new life together. And that's why, because I keep getting a lot of emails even now saying, is Jean in France Jenny? And yes, she is. And that would have been very clear if that chapter had been left in, but we took it out.
That's so interesting that was a whole chapter.
Right, because it's where you see them the morning after, and Jenny is there sort of, they're both there, smoke-stained, hoarse, Jenny's been punched on the head, she's kind of muzzy, and Charles, and they're both blaming themselves for losing their daughter and for what happened, and Charles is like, we're gonna finally do what I should have done years ago, and we're just going, and it can all burn to the ground, and that's just it.
Wow. That is really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
And I hope I didn't ruin it for anyone who hasn't gone that far yet, but it was not actually how I thought the book was going to end. When I embarked on this book, we joke that when I outline books, I only outline like 5 chapters ahead, and then the rest of my outline is, and then something happens. And then as I sort of get to those points, I keep on outlining, and there's always, and something happens, but I always have a vague idea of how the ending is going to work. And with this book, I really thought Jenny was going to die. But Jenny was such a strong character that was just not something she was going to allow to happen. And when I was around 2/3 of the way through the book, I realized that no, actually, Jenny survived. And that changed the whole complexion of the book for me.
Wow. Sorry, I just want to make, are you there? Do you hear that, Julie? I think she's muted.
Yes.
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 Okay. Very cool. Wow, that is interesting.
Sometimes characters just, they drive the books for you, because I really felt going into this book that how can there be a happy ending for an enslaved woman in this time period? But she was such a strong character. She created her own happy ending.
That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you for that tidbit, that big tidbit. And I'm going to say, Sabrina here said she would love to ask a question. So Sabrina, come on up.
Hello.
Hi, Sabrina.
I have listened to you on a couple podcasts, and I was really curious. I know that in those podcasts you have talked about what research you've done and the letters that you were actually written, that you have read and based a lot of the information on. My question is about Emily. Considering that she is a woman in the 1800s and that she is unwed and that she has no desire to be wed, nor is she going to have a man tell her what to do or who to marry or whether to sell or not. Is that more based on history, or is that more leaning on the fiction side?
She definitely comes out of a real tradition. So poor Emily is caught between 2 conflicting historical moments. So she's raised in this very progressive environment in the heart of the emancipation movement, where her mother is a founding member of the Bristol and Clifton Anti-Slavery Societies, Women's Auxiliary, and all that. And so there is this very strong evangelical strain in England in the 1830s when she's a little girl and going into the 1840s, where women play a major role. And you may have heard there's a reformer named Hannah More, who's this very powerful character. And so women really were at the forefront of this movement, and they were strong and powerful and had a voice and ran things. But at the same time, you have what's called the angel of the hearth mentality in sort of the mid-Victorian era, which is really peaking right then in the 1850s. And that's the idea that women are these angels of the home who should be meek and mild and stay at home and just spend their virtue on raising lovely, virtuous children while men go out into the world and do the hard stuff. So poor Emily is raised in this one tradition, but she's being clobbered on the other side by this other tradition. And because she's a member of the rising middle class, it hits her particularly hard because it's the middle classes, especially the wealthy middle classes, who really glom onto this whole angel of the hearth thing. And I mean, people like her cousin Adam are totally buying into it. And so poor Emily has been raised one way, but the winds of change have moved another way. And so she's in this unfortunate position where her legacy really gives her a way out. I mean, it's an interesting, contradiction, because this is the exact same time that you have the Crimean War and Florence Nightingale revolutionizing nursing and going out to a war zone with her lamp to be the lady of the lamp and all that. So you have these pioneering women who were raised in this earlier model, but who are coming up against this prevailing idea of the angel of the hearth. And some of them manage to break through and do amazing things, but they also tend to be the ones who are then labeled as spinsters. And they also tend to be women with independent means one way or another.
Mhm. Wow. Sabrina, does that answer that for you?
Yeah, that answers it perfectly, and I completely understand the spinster comment. It resonates very well.
And actually what's great about those, when you read about sort of the real women who inspired Emily, a lot of them do wind up married, and they find men who get that they are powerful go-getters. And actually the book I'm working on now is sort of loosely based on a real person. It's later, it's in the 1890s, but sort of at a time when you get the similar push-pull. And I love that the real woman who the book I'm working on now is based on, she was this pioneering archaeologist and war nurse who would sometimes pioneer she was one of the first people to dig up Crete, but then periodically she would drop everything and go nurse in war zones or organize relief efforts. And she marries this lovely British classicist who's like, that's okay, dear. I'll stay home with the kids while you go take 18 Smithies to a war zone. And I just love that there were men like that back then who understood that women could do amazing things.
Yeah, wow, that sounds like it, that man was long before before the time when that was a thing. So
the thing is they pop up, and because this book I'm working on right now, it's sort of a prequel to Band of Sisters. It's about loosely based on the real woman who founded the Smith College Relief Unit, but in her early 20s, back in the 1890s, and it's set partially during the Spanish-American War. So I've been reading up on all these women who nursed or were otherwise involved in the Spanish-American War, and among them was a war reporter who went out to war zone, a female war reporter whose husband stayed home with the kids. And so I love that you find, when you go looking, you find these women, that they were there, and we just seem to have forgotten about them. And that these options for women existed, and that there were men who were willing to be like, okay, I'll take care of managing the cook and the housekeeper and watching the kids while you go off and do war reporting in Cuba.
wow, yeah, no, and we haven't heard much about that. Whether even if there were a good amount of men that did have those roles, then there certainly hasn't. They haven't been publicized throughout history too much. So that's great that you've got those examples, and I'm sure we can go back and read in more detail about those kinds of different dynamics within households that did have the woman out in the world instead of the men, because that was very unusual for that time.
Well, I think it really is, a lot of it also depends on social class, because in poorer families, of course, women were out in the world working, they couldn't do anything else. And in the very, very upper classes, there was actually a lot of leeway for women to do crazy things. It's really the middle and upper middle class that tended to adhere more strictly to these ideas of gender norms. And so I think it's when we see examples of that in those groups that it really stands out.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Wow, very interesting. Okay, Cindy Wilson has a question. Cindy, would you like to ask Lauren?
Sure. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah. So I loved this book. I don't mean to take away from this, but I loved this book so much that I just immediately went to read other books that she had written. And I loved The Other Daughter, but I was really fascinated by That Summer, because I also listened to some podcasts and where she talked about all the research, and for the historical side, but that summer adds in all this art stuff. And so I just wondered about how you added that layer in. It was a really fun little spin on it. And I really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much. Actually, it's so funny because that same editor who told me never to write a book about the Caribbean was also like, oh my God, you have to write about art stuff. Okay, you can if you really want to, but just keep the art stuff to a minimum. But so for those who haven't read, That Summer, which is, by the way, the title I hate most of all the titles of my books because it does not apply to the book at all. But That Summer is set back, it's set around a modern American woman who inherits a house in England in the suburbs of London from a great aunt she doesn't remember. And she finds a lost pre-Raphaelite painting behind an old wardrobe. And so the book goes back and forth between her experience going back to London, which she left as a very small child, and sort of rediscovering her own past and her family's past, and London in the 1840s, when a lonely middle-class housewife falls in love with one of the early pre-Raphaelite painters. And it was heavily inspired by, if anyone knows about, oh gosh, why am I blanking on his name? John Everett Millay's love affair with the art critic John Ruskin's wife, because the two of them fell in love and eventually she wound up divorcing Ruskin or getting the marriage annulled, and they married. But I had seen a play about them of all things when I was a teenager, and it stuck with me. And so this idea of sort of the woman stuck in a loveless marriage and this hot young painter who's at the forefront of what was then this really cutting edge, trendy movement. That idea caught me, and the interplay with the present day. But this book also, by the way, had the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me with a book, which is when the book was in proofs, getting ready to go to press, an article appeared in The Guardian, the English paper, lost pre-Raphaelite painting found behind wardrobe of house in suburb of London. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. It turned out actually it was the house of a pre-Raphaelite painter, and his friends liked to paint murals on the walls, and so they had moved the wardrobe and there was this forgotten pre-Raphaelite mural on the wall, but the headline was basically the premise of my book. I was like,
Wild.
Weird.
Wow, that is so cool. Now, did that help with book sales?
You have a number of people reading articles about the pre-Raphaelites in The Guardian. It's just not enough to really move the needle. But I've always treasured that moment because it's like anything you can imagine might actually happen.
That's really crazy. Wow. Very, very cool. That's great. Okay. I've got another person, Vesna. She has a question for you. Vesna, would you like to ask? Vesna?
I feel like we need the, what is it, the Jeopardy music or whatever.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, well, I'll ask her question then, just in case. So Vesna wanted to know, how has your writing...
She says, I'm here, can't access camera. Okay.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so I'll ask her question. Vesna asked, Lauren, how has your writing changed during the pandemic this year? Are you writing more or less?
During the early phase of lockdown, because New York went into lockdown very early. So we went into lockdown the second week of March. And I remember it very vividly. I bought an espresso machine, which was my best Nespresso, which was my best pandemic purchase. And my husband claims kept him alive throughout lockdown.
That's important.
And we figured, it was like Gilligan going for a 3-hour tour. We thought it was gonna be 2 weeks. We bought groceries for 2 weeks. We figure, okay, well, we'll juggle without childcare for 2 weeks. And my husband's in finance. So he has one of those jobs where you're expected to work all the time. So the deal we struck was I would get what otherwise would have been lunchtime. So from 11 to 1 would be my work time, and the rest, and I had, when we went into lockdown, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. And my 6-year-old wound up moving to remote learning, and my 2-year-old just wanted to know why we couldn't go to the playground anymore.
Sure.
Because we didn't leave our apartment between March 12th and the end of June. Like they did not cross the threshold. So he would take me to the window and point out the window and be like, the park is that way, mommy. In case you've forgotten, we go out the door, we go that way. I'm like, we can't go. We we'll play in the apartment. But so I had those 2 hours of work time a day, and crazily, it made me incredibly productive because I would, save my coffee for that moment and, make my double Nespresso pod and come into the room and lock the door. We also got a lock on my bedroom door for this purpose. And and I wrote really about, 70,000 words worth of Band of Sisters.
Wow.
That way during that.
March to June.
Well, actually, no, the book was due April 1. So I went into hyperdrive with this book. It wound up being a very long book. But it was also one of those weird overlap things where I was writing about these Smith women in a war zone, living through these unimaginable conditions, and yet managing to find sisterhood and hope and good things in the midst of despair. And so I found the writing very uplifting because here were other people living through unimaginable times, and yet they'd gotten through it and they'd all come out okay. And so there was this weird synergy between what I was living and what I was writing. And so the funny thing is, I've been very lucky because our numbers were low in New York over the summer. My kids got to go back to school. I mean, my preschooler goes for 2 hours a day, but every little bit helps.
Yeah.
And I have been so much less productive now that they're back in school because there's this weird, I think part of it is, how you have that adrenaline rush, like right before exams, and then the adrenaline goes away and you're just useless. And part of it is suddenly I have all this time, I don't have to be as focused. So I keep wondering, are we going to go into lockdown again? And is that going to really help my writing? And I should not be thinking that way.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, A, you probably will. Maybe, I don't know. B, I've heard, so my husband and I, we own a real estate company. So I've read all these business books about how, there's these theories that if you give yourself a shorter amount of time to work, or a shorter amount of time to get a task done, you'll actually, you'll get it done much more efficiently, much more quickly than if you gave yourself, say you gave yourself a month to do the same task, it would take you that month versus if you gave yourself a week and a half, because so much other procrastination is done,
Yes.
or you put it off. And so that's
I totally believe it. And I think, different people have different work styles. I really admire the organized, methodical people who plot out a task and then do it in these nice increments of time. And with every book, I'm like, this time I'm going to organize it and do this amount in this amount of time. But I am fundamentally an adrenaline worker.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to leave things till close to deadline and panic in order to work. So.
Well, I always wonder because, stereotypically speaking, I guess, creative types maybe aren't the most organized in general, because your creativity, you're not necessarily someone that's going to be like bing, 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 personality. And I could be wrong. I don't know for sure, but at least in my experience, the creative people I know are, they bend the rules. So I always wonder, if authors can be that, live by a schedule. I'm going to get this much done, this hour, this much done. Or if, you just kind of gotta let your creativity take over and do it.
I think it's a combination of the two. For me, once that panic sets in and I'm in adrenaline mode, I can complete tasks I used to make myself schedules over and over and over again, and then check things off when I did them on the schedule. So once I'm in adrenaline mode, I can do that. I can be organized, but I think it's part of it is my brain is working out the book while I'm procrastinating. And so I can't really kick in and actually sit down and write it until I hit that certain point.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for that too. So that makes
Or it's just a good excuse.
Yeah, I'm sure it's legitimate. Wow. Okay. Let's see if we can squeeze in maybe one more question. Marissa, are you there? Marissa?
I am. Somehow my video went away. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello.
I got unmuted, but I lost my video. Anyway, yes, I have 2 quick questions if we have time. One is, first of all, Lauren, thank you so much. I adored this book. Similarly, not something I normally would pick for myself, and completely fell in love, and I'm super excited for your next book. but specifically one is about the story and then one is a little bit more about process. So similarly, if there's anyone who doesn't want to hear, I give you a warning, a spoiler warning. I need to know more then about if they survived and moved on, you know, Jonathan sort of taking or stealing, now I'm even more confused, their daughter, sort of what went on there? Do they know that she existed? Did he take her for their own? He ultimately then went on to sell him the farm, so they had communication. So I need to know more about this, please.
I think it really, you know, it's so funny. I've gotten some very angry emails being like, how could Jonathan do that? How could he take the child? And I think it's a combination of factors. It really rests in their personalities. And Jonathan, when he, oh, you got your camera back. Huh? Oh, that's such a perfect plantation-y sort of bed. But anyway, I think, you know, when Jonathan takes a child, it's in the midst of the rising and the fire, and he's trying to save her from Marianne. And so it all happens in the moment that he grabs her. And then I think later on, and then he goes on this extended wedding journey where, of course, he's out of touch with everyone because it's not, you know, communications work very differently back then. And by the time he realizes that, you know, Charles and Jenny, though actually, sorry, backing up. So, I mean, he realizes Charles is alive, but I think he doesn't trust Charles. I think Jonathan has always had a very low opinion of Charles. And the truth is, Charles is kind of a crappy father to Lottie. And
Interesting.
he has very mixed feelings about her. And Jonathan, who loves this child wholeheartedly, has always seen that. And I think didn't really think Charles deserved her. And so when Jonathan thinks Jenny is dead, he has no issue taking the child away from Charles. And so I think, you know, by the time the smoke is cleared, and he's also one of these people who has a happy facility of convincing himself that things are the way he wants them to be. So I think he's practically convinced himself that, you know, Lucy is his child by the end of it. Although there is still that niggling something in the back of his head, which is why in the end he buys Peveril's and then holds on to it, doesn't do anything with it, and then leaves it to Emily. So I think, you know, there's this, but he's the sort of man who will never acknowledge fault or guilt or wrongdoing. And so he can never say anything about it. He can never admit. The only thing he can do is leave it in his will. And I don't think he realizes that Jenny is alive because Charles is deliberately cagey about that. Jenny goes to France and becomes Jean. And it's partially because, I mean, she is at the time still Marianne's property. And the property laws about this, you know, technically it's unclear whether she could be dragged back in chains from France under French law, but she's still technically Marianne's property, which also makes the child Marianne's property. And it's not until later with the Emancipation Act and all that, that all that's cleared up. And by then everyone is so settled in their respective lives that, well, you get the idea.
Yes. I love it. Thank you so much for answering that. Can I have this much more of your time?
Oh, absolutely.
I have to ask you about, this is a very strange question, I'm sure, but the vocabulary. I, as someone who spent most of my life in school, mostly science and medicine, but also Latin and like Romance languages, I say this with the most love. I've never felt more illiterate. And I love that I read this on a Kindle because it was so easy to define it. So I was genuinely curious, are these terms that, again, just, I realize as an author, words are literally your bread and butter and a historian, but are these words that like were placed in that time period? Are these words that just came to you? I had literally had to look up so many of them.
Oh my goodness, thank you. It's a combination of things. I grew up reading so much Victoria Holt and all of these other, you know, 80s authors who used deliberate Anglicizations and archaisms and all that. So those crept into my normal vocabulary to a large extent. But also when I'm working on a book, I try to immerse myself as much as I can in whatever writings of the period I can find. And so the couple of authors who were writing plays and stuff in early 19th century Barbados or late 18th century Barbados, I read everything they wrote and tried to get a sense of what their vocabulary would be like. And so some of that came out of those plays and letters and whatnot, where I was taking terms that they used and trying to put them into context.
I loved it. I always love to learn. So thank you. I enjoyed this book immensely.
Oh, thanks so much. I feel like, with all of these books, there's a certain amount of ventriloquism where I'm trying to let sort of the time period and the people speak through me. And it's very weird because as you move from one book to another, especially when you're hopping time periods, like Band of Sisters, the characters all sound like an Ella Montgomery novel. Because I had so many of these women's letters, thousands of their letters home I was reading, and they all read like Rilla of Ingleside. And so for months I talked like Rilla of Ingleside. And it's yeah.
That's great. It's almost like method acting.
It's exactly
You
like
feel
method
your
acting.
yourself. Wow. That's so great. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. This has been so interesting and informative. And I loved your book. I think everyone here loved your book. So thank you for joining us. And
thank you so much for having me. It is such joy to get to like geek out about all this stuff. So thank you for letting me ramble on.
oh my goodness, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for this. This reminds me of almost like a port wine. The final product kind of tastes like some kind of a port, or like a wine in a cask, like a rum cask.
Oh, that's exactly the sort, because that's the sort of thing they drank.
Yeah.
They put away such quantities of it. My God, those men were pickled.
That's great. Well, thank you again. And, we're definitely going to read Band of Sisters. And so we'll have you back next year for that, of course. But
I would love that. And we'll get to do great French things, although not like the war ration stuff. I think we should skip that and go back to the buttery, sugary stuff.
yes, that's great. Well, thank you. Congratulations on this book, and good luck and congratulations on that one. And we'll certainly be in touch. And I'm going to read more of your books as well. And so I'm sure I'll be.
And I will be following your blog because I have fallen in love with all of your recipes and articles and all that. So
oh, thank you so much. Well, you provided a lot of great material this month. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to do a little giveaway, so you don't have to stay for that. But
okay, I will make sure that I will go see if my 3-year-old has actually made it into bed or is running around in his dinosaur costume. So good night, everyone. Thank you so much for spending the end of your weekend with me. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, Lauren.
Oh, there's fun.
All right. Okay, everybody. So I'm going to do a giveaway a little bit differently this time. I was introduced to a website where I can input all the names of people who entered, and it pops up winners. So instead of me cutting in the tiny little confetti pieces, we're going to try it this way. So brace ourselves. I'm sorry, I have a Band-Aid on my thumb, so I keep like doing that. It does not look very nice. Okay. So let's get to it. And I meant to take my bathrobe over here so I could show you guys, but we are going to first raffle off, I guess, not raffle off, but pick the winner for the most cozy bathrobe known to man. That's what I call it because that's what it is, from Pottery Barn. So hang on, let me just see. And if I call, so I wanted to make it so everyone that wins, if you're going to win, you have to be present on the call. So I may have to, if someone's not here, I may have to go to the next person. So if you are here, please unmute yourself and claim your prize. So, okay, the bathrobe. Let's see. The winner for this is Donna Lighthead. I don't know if I say it right. Donna, are you here? If you are, please come forward. You won the coziest bathrobe. I hope Donna's here. I know she was going to be. Donna? Do I hear you? Donna? Oh, I don't think she's here. Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the next name. Let's see. Kimberly Johnson. I know Kimberly was here. Kimberly, are you here?
Woohoo!
Oh, and you wanted this one.
I know. I thought if I don't win, I will just order it from Pottery Barn.
No, well, congratulations. You must have
Thank
put
you.
something out into the universe or whatever, because that's great. Well, it'll look perfect with your cozy Christmas tree and your PJs that you had on.
Well, the Christmas tree's not really mine. It's just a background. I gotta be
well,
truthful to that.
Still, I actually thought it was real for a second. So, oh, well, I'm so glad that you got it then. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. That was so great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll talk to you later to get your address and all that fun stuff. But
Okay, thanks.
congratulations. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. That is funny. Okay, so the next one is Vogue on Locations. This is a nice coffee table book. It's got, different Vogue photo shoots from all over the world. Very, very beautiful. Let me see. Connie Burton. Connie Burton, are you here? Looking. Connie. Don't see Connie. Hang on. Okay, let me try again. And I feel bad, I feel bad not giving it to the people who are here, but I really want to make it so that people are here to win. So let's do this again. Okay, so the next is, sorry, hang on, I pressed it wrong. Okay. Betsy Sisson. Is Betsy here?
I am. Thank you so much.
Hey, oh, I'm glad. Congratulations.
Thank you. And that'll be lovely.
Good. Yes, enjoy it. It's a very beautiful book. And, especially now while we're still home, you can at least pretend you're traveling. Maybe plan out some trips for next year. Fingers crossed.
That sounds like a great plan. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Congratulations. All right. So that was Vogue on Location. Next, we've got, the Ina Garten cookbook, Modern Comfort Food. And it's only almost December, so plenty of cold months to enjoy that one. Let me see. Okay. Lynn Lemaire. Lynn? Is Lynn here? Lynn. Nope. Okay. And Lemaire. I'll try again. Mary Ellen Zweibel or Zwiebel. Sorry again if I butcher your name. Mary Ellen. No. Okay. Hang on. Let me see. Renata Pavri. Is Renata here? Renata? Sorry, guys. The suspense is killing me too. All right, hang on. Anne Marie Diffusco. Oh, Anne Marie. I know Anne Marie was here before.
Hi, I'm here.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Anne Marie is an old family friend from, you've known my parents forever and me since I think I was born. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I hope you like Ina Garten.
I do. I love her.
Good. Perfect. So, yeah, you guys still in Rhode Island?
We are. We're
Oh,
in
yeah.
Wakefield.
Oh, so you're like right down the street. Perfect. Well, I'll get your address later too, and we'll get that sent over.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Say hi to Frank.
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so those were those books, and now we've got 3 books. I'll just tell you guys right now because I'm going to put it up later. So for our December book, we are going to read Christmas at the Island Hotel by Jenny Colgan. Now I know Jenny's written a ton of great best-selling books. I haven't read them yet, but I have to assume maybe some of you guys have. Maybe has anyone read a Jenny Colgan book? Well, we've got 3 winners. So let's see. Okay, 1. Okay. Dora De Assis.
I'm here.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
You are very welcome. So I may have your address, but I'll talk to you afterwards and we'll get that book sent out to you hopefully over the next few days.
Cool. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
good. It'll be nice and festive.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Congratulations. Okay, all right, we got two more of Christmas at the Island Hotel. Cheryl Delk. Cheryl Delk here? Cheryl. Oh, Cheryl, no. Okay. What about Georgia Schneider? Georgia? I see someone's on here. It just says iPad, but I don't know. Georgia. All right. Let me see. Okay. Mary Eileen. Mary Eileen, are you here?
I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Hey, congratulations.
Great, thanks.
No, you're welcome. So we had spoken actually about Jenny Colgan previously. So
I did. Yes, you did.
all right.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I will we'll get that out to you this week as well.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we got one more of Christmas at the Island Hotel, which by the way takes place on a small island, I guess, between, I want to say Scotland and Norway, which I would have got Scotland and Norway. So should be interesting and something different for us. Okay, so book number 3, Christmas at the Island Hotel. Maria Siciliano. Maria here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey,
Nice. Thank you.
you're very welcome. Congratulations.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, so just send me your address whenever you get around to it and we'll send it out and it'll be a fun, like I said, a fun festive read for all of us. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So that's it for now, guys, but we will do another giveaway, of course, for December. And I thank you all very, very much for joining today. And I hope you enjoyed our call with Lauren. And yeah, we'll talk soon. And I'm going to post all the details on this book in probably within the hour or so. So
Great. Thank you very much.
thank you all. Have a wonderful night. Hope everyone
Thank
has
you, Juliana.
You're so welcome. Thank you, guys. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.